Hello, I am Alfred Valley of the House of Valley, and I roleplay as a tabletop game designer. And here I am in peak roleplayer mode, giving you a bit of a design commentary for this Thousand Empty Light. So, what is Thousand Empty Light? It is a solo adventure made specifically for the Mothership RPG. As far as I can tell, it is the first and only adventure made specifically for solo play. There has been a module released before called Lone Star by a creator called Parts Per Million, which sort of outlines a solo procedure that you can use for Mothership. But this is a standalone adventure. And the idea is it is an adventure, it's got sort of narrative detail, but it is also its own sort of standalone procedure that can be ported over to other Mothership adventures or other sci-fi games and adventures in those systems. So possibly the first question might be, why the name Thousand Empty Light? This has come directly from a little tool created by Loot the Room's Chris Bissett. They made this adventure name generator tool. So you click a button and it spits out a bunch of random names you can give an adventure. And I got the name Thousand Empty Light out of this, and I really liked it. I like how idiosyncratic it seems. It is obviously grammatically incorrect, but it sticks out for that very reason. It also seems to convey the sense of something not being quite right, which is very appropriate for the theme and the flavour of this whole thing. The artwork you see here was born of a rainy days arts and crafts session with my then toddler, where we were experimenting with paint bottles and squeezing paint directly out onto the paper and folding it in half. And I made these two pictures which I've combined to make this, and obviously I've touched up a lot in Photoshop. Shout out to the threshold feature, probably one of my most used tools. Doing a lot of heavy lifting here, making it nice and grainy and a bit lo-fi seeming. Just a note on the artwork, I'm calling this Xerox Psychedelia. It's obviously stark black and white throughout. It's evoking those textures of photocopy machines and Xerox machines, and that's because this whole thing is presented as an in-universe corporate document, which let's take a look a bit more about what that means. Depths kill, center yourself. So yes, the big bad corporation in this adventure is Hasmos Corporation, who are ostensibly a service corporation servicing all sorts of businesses across the universe. Now, the little box you see on the right here saying caution is probably the first sign that this isn't quite your normal adventure. I used the term in-universe already. Essentially, this whole adventure is a diegetic document. It's something that you might encounter within the world of Mothership. Which means, in terms of this being a document to play, there aren't any overt sorts of instructions or rules like you'd normally get in an adventure or a game. There's nothing here that says when you encounter this sort of thing, what you should do is roll this and then consult this table for a random entry. No, all of this is written as if it is a real document you might receive. Obviously, I've had to make a few concessions with that, and there's a bit of a compromise to be had in terms of providing something that's completely immersive and thematic, and also actually providing a document that people can use. And because of that, I'm also presenting this game with a companion document, which is an example play that just helps people to work out exactly how to use this thing. I'm hoping that you don't need to rely on it too much, but I don't want to just completely alienate everyone with this thing. That caution box is my way of providing a content warning. Basically, if you're making games or adventures, please put content warnings on your stuff. Here I've tried to try and find a way to do this that stays in theme, in character to the whole piece. So personnel are advised not to proceed past this point if they have heightened sensitivity to darkness, tight spaces, marine wildlife, peril, bodily harm, or extreme solitude. It's a long list there. But yeah, content warning, beware. And here we are, Thousand Empty Light, Manual of Operation. UPB 154 here, that stands for Unadopted Planetary Body 154. It's basically just the name of the planet that this whole adventure happens on, and it's abandoned. Nothing to see there, just a whole bunch of water. Leaning fully into this whole idea of it being a corporate document, here's your classic sort of message from the top brass. This is one of my favourite things in this adventure, is that it talks about, please join me in remembering all the Lamplighters who have fallen in the line of duty. And you can quite obviously see, at least in the digital version, this very shoddy sticker that's just been put over the top of a whole long list of people. That probably sets the tone for the sort of experience you're going to have. Corporation's bad, maybe they're not quite being honest, and maybe you are in danger. Because you are playing the lone Lamplighter in this adventure. A Lamplighter is, in this universe, well, in the Hasmos Corporation at least, a maintenance worker who just helps keep the power on, goes and maintains structures or buildings, keeps the power on, turns the lights on. And that's essentially what you're going to be doing. You're going to be going through a big semi-derelict underwater tunnel on an abandoned planet, and you're going to be taking it section by section, switching the power on, switching the lights on, because as the name might suggest, Thousand Empty Light, there's lots of lights that aren't working. It's completely dark down there, so you'll be finding your way through an environment that's not necessarily very cooperative. You can see a preview there of the sort of things that are in this document in the table of contents. It was worth noting that this whole adventure is sort of in two parts. You have all this stuff which is a combination of theme and mechanical information in terms of playing, but you also have a whole other part which is the actual narrative material of each section of this tunnel, and that's presented as transcripts from the previous Lamplighter who's been through and left maintenance reports on these things that this adventure calls Memocom modules. But the thing is, those are things that you encounter through play. In the sort of context of this document, they're not part of the document. They're stuff that you encounter in person. So as a result, they're not part of the table of contents. You just have to come to them when you come to them. Right, here's an overview. You can see the tunnel itself. Those two long cylinders either end of the tunnel, those are what are called caissons. These are real things that you get in, well, especially in industrial construction. They're basically big cylinders that go right up against a seabed or some sort of underwater surface, and to prevent that cylinder from filling up with water, it's put under high pressure, so all the water stays out. But that introduces one of the main themes of this adventure, the fact that it's an environment of high pressure, which presents lots of risks and challenges for whoever will be working here, which happens to be you. So your character is going to be undergoing hyperbaric intervention, which basically just means being put under high pressure. Yeah, you're going to be descending 70 meters underwater. Right then, you can't have a solo sort of game or solo adventure without some sort of procedure. There's a couple of different things going on here. The stuff on the left is basically reiterating what you're doing here and the sort of challenges you face. It says about your objective, obviously you're restoring light and power. There's also this thing about an additional objective, which we can look at in a second. The workflow formalizes basically what you'll be doing. You're going to be entering different areas, looking at the transcript from the previous Lamplighter, which includes a map of the area. You're going to be using the system you see on the right called Oracle, and you're going to make your way through the tunnel bit by bit, reinstating power and lighting, and leaving your own reports. And the very sort of Mothership aspect of this whole thing is you'll be consulting Panic, the Panic reference. But in this adventure, the normal Panic table from Mothership has been slightly reflavoured, and in fact Panic stands for Pneumatic and Narcotic Incident Chart. Again, we'll look at that in a moment. So Oracle, this is basically the bones of this. The bones, is that the right term? The sort of heart of the procedure itself, and this has been designed to be able to stand alone outside of this adventure. You can use this for another Mothership adventure if you want to try and solo it, or some other sci-fi adventure. You can see in the whole corporate way of things, Oracle is yet another acronym, is that the right term? Which stands for Observe, Resolve, Act, Conclude, Leave Evidence. Observe in this adventure mechanically means consult the Semiotic standard, which we'll look at next. Resolve just means decide what you want to do, but in the Mothership sense of things, make sure you're using your skills and equipment. Act means attempt your action. That's the whole Mothership thing of, okay, roll 1d100, see what happens. Conclude basically is, did you succeed? What happens next? That sort of thing. And leave evidence is an instruction to fill out this thing called the incidents and near misses form, which again we'll look at in a second. There's this added part of leave evidence which is specific to this adventure, which just means next time you get to one of the memocom modules, which are either end of each section, make sure you leave a maintenance report. So let's jump ahead to the sort of reference material at the back, and that includes the semiotic standard and all these other bits. Let's have a look. So first of all, the semiotic standard, or to give it its whole name, the Combined Systems Semiotic Standard version 2.0. So anyone who's familiar with a bit of the background around the film Alien will be familiar with this phrase, semiotic standard. There was an artist called Ron Cobb who created the semiotic standard for Alien, which has got a nice long name which I can't possibly remember off the top of my head. But basically it's this sort of system of signage that you can see in the film around the spaceship that provides this sort of extra level of detail and is sort of thematically resonant throughout the whole film. You can sort of see that a lot of thought and believability has been put into the background dressing of that film. So this takes direct inspiration from that semiotic standard, but makes it into a sort of solo prompt table. So that first part of Oracle, that acronym, was observe. That means look at this chart, roll a d50. You can see there's 50 items here, and a d50 is just 1d100 divided by 2, round up. So you roll a d50, you come up with a sign, and this helps inform what's happening in your gameplay, or what happens next. And these can be taken very literally. So say you roll a 20, it says alien forms, well you can take that to mean there's something alien in the scene that your character's in. Or you might choose to interpret the sort of word associations that are included with each one. So unfamiliarity or novelty. And the other thing you can see here is you can also use this chart to answer yes/no questions. So is there an immediate hazard in front of me? Roll dice. No, but. So you can interpret that how you will. There's a whole sort of logic and system to the way these are laid out. You see some have got a darker border, some are actually black inside as opposed to white. I'm not going to go into detail about what all that means, but you can try and work out the sort of system at play there. Hint, it's not that interesting. But the whole idea is there is a logic to it, much in the same way as there was a logic to the original semiotic standard in Alien. So along with the sort of Oracle procedure, you could use this for any Mothership adventure or any sci-fi adventure. It's similar to my previous big game, which was Lay on Hands, had its own sort of solo prompt table. It's not sci-fi based, but the whole idea with it when I made it was that it would be able to be used outside of that game. It's a resource that is useful for solo players, no matter sort of what system they're using. That's the idea anyway. Above this, and we're going to have to zoom out, aren't we? We have, so all this bit at the back of the book represents sort of the reference material. We have a sort of reminder what Oracle means, and here is the instance and near misses chart, and this is taking direct inspiration from health and safety charts, health and safety forms. Now, I work for a large corporation and I've had to fill out forms eerily similar to this. This is very much simplified, but this is very much the sort of thing that I've had to do. And the whole idea here is when your character experiences an incident, which could be like a trip, some sort of injury or illness, encountering some hazard, disrepair, blah 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 blah, you fill out this form afterwards. So you create a new label, A through to J, you put whatever the incident was, and you roll a d10 and mark across by the result you get. As you go along, you're going to fill out more of these, and it'll come to the point, like in this example, where you fill out a cross in a column that's already got a cross in it. At that point, a repercussion is triggered, either by the first thing or the thing you've just put down. You decide which one it is, you erase that entry, and you determine what happens, what the repercussion is. And the numbers 1 through to 10 basically give an indication of the severity of that repercussion, 1 being low and 10 being high. And you can see here that it also specifies in this form that you need to make a panic check when there is a repercussion, which is a good opportunity to look at the panic chart, or the panic reference I should say, because chart is part of the name. So here is our reflavoured panic table from Mothership, except it's all symptoms you might commonly experience if you were experiencing decompression sickness or nitrogen narcosis. Obviously things start off, simple and actually fairly positive, and they quickly get awful. So you have things like anxiety, impaired reasoning, terror, and all of these have mechanical implications. You have something like formication here. This is a real term. A sensation of small insects crawling under the skin for 3d10 minutes. Requires a sanity save with disadvantage every time you attempt an action or gain 1 damage, bleeding, from scratching. So basically, you're hallucinating the sensation of small insects on your skin and you can't stop scratching, so you keep causing yourself some damage. And ultimately, the worst thing on this chart is blackout. Now, I couldn't bring myself to put just you die, which is essentially what this is, because you might find a way in the context of your adventure to make your character scrape through somehow, and good luck to you if you can. Okay, so here we're going to skip right back again to where were we? Right, so we've been through the procedure, that's up there. Next stuff is clearance. Let's maybe zoom out a little bit. The stuff on the left here basically just is it's a bit of theme. So it's saying mandatory training, industrial equipment, recommended training. That's Hasmos telling you what to do. I mean, they're not your dad. You can do whatever you like, but it's up to you. This part on the left is basically get your character sheet ready. So there's stuff here about medical sign-off, which just means, make sure your stress level starts at 2, like you would normally have for a normal Mothership game. Make sure you fill out your character reference. That's your character sheet. And some extra equipment that Hasmos has very kindly provided you with. That's nice of them. Now the stuff on the right is related to what I mentioned up here about the additional objective. So if you don't know, this adventure, Thousand Empty Light, was originally a Kickstarter campaign, and there was a pledge level for a sort of deluxe edition limited to 100 copies. And I said that for those 100 copies, each would have a unique code given to them. And that's what you'd find here if you had one of those copies, one of the physical copies. You'd find a little yellow sticker in that top right bit where you can see that there's the sort of texture there that you might get in a letter from the bank with a new PIN number in for your credit card. What that would be on that yellow sticker would be a string of binary code, 0s and 1s, which you'd use using the instructions on this next page to basically decode a message that is unique to you if you have one of these copies. And those messages are literally 2 or 3 words given an additional objective, and they range from completely prosaic to quite out there, and it's just a little extra something to focus on during gameplay that could completely change the way your adventure pans out potentially. I had to consult with a friend of mine who's a cryptographer to work out how to do this. I'm really happy with how it's come out, but I have to wait and see if anyone has much success in decoding their messages. Here's a bit more propaganda from Hasmos. The greatest hazard is carelessness. We all know that. Which brings us neatly on to hazards. All sorts of stuff here. I don't want to linger too long, but depth complications I've talked about. That's essentially what the panic reference is all about. You have lots of stuff here that's quite simple and thematic, like unlit areas. Well, the whole thing's unlit. Good luck with that. Seawater, flooding. You have some sections like this that have stat blocks, and with each one there's some special details around how those things are going to behave if you encounter them and are fighting them. Hey, here's a nasty little crab. I actually made this out of clay, sort of modelling clay. I made this thing and embellished it slightly in Photoshop, but I just have this now in my house and I'm not really sure what to do with it. It is falling apart slightly, which is a bit sad. We've got stuff like here, 7 beamish dust. This is nanoparticles that aren't quite behaving, that like to cluster up together and cause localized and uncontrolled, though largely benign growth. Oh, that's nice. Little tip: probably don't look at images of teratomaters. Is that, how do you say that? Teratomaters. Just, these are things that are like cancerous growths that you get in the body that have like teeth and hair and things like that. It's really gross. Recommend you don't look it up. Bud. Here's Bud, number 8. Bud is a high-grade bionic owl that someone's left behind on site. This is directly inspired by a budgie I once had as a kid, who I owned for a day. I convinced my parents somehow to buy me this budgie, and had him for a day. The next day I went out somewhere, came home, my sister said, "Do you want the good news or the bad news?" The bad news is Buddy, my budgie, has escaped. He's flown out the door. He's gone. And the good news was that she'd made me a tuna sandwich. I was quite upset about Buddy. Rest in peace, Buddy. Although actually I think Buddy's out there somewhere. He's living the good life. So there he is. Whole bunch of other stuff here. You have number 13 here, unidentified Leviathan class cephalopod. This is inspired by my time playing Subnautica, and if you are familiar with that game, you'll know that it's really, well, A, it's terrifying, but B, it's particularly terrifying when you encounter these Leviathan class things. And the creepy thing about this one is that its existence has not been confirmed, but several members of personnel have reported seeing a creature matching this description in their dreams. And this is presumably the crew members' drawing of what they've seen in their dreams. Essentially, in this adventure, I've made 3 creepy long things, which probably says a lot about my personal fears. You have huge creepy long thing, medium creepy long thing, that's on the right there, the clay lurk, and small creepy long thing, which is sea welts. Sea welts are basically worm-like leech things that can deposit eggs under your skin. Lovely. The clay lurk is some bolt-headed eel thing that can launch itself out of water and move around like a snake. Delightful. Now we're getting close to the actual narrative sections, the transcripts and all that. There's space here for specialist equipment. I should say about fluorocarbon liquid. If you have seen the film The Abyss, you might remember a scene where one character snatches the other character's pet rat and submerges it in this liquid, in this sort of cage. And the other character is understandably quite upset by this, and the rat seems to thrash around for a while until finally it sort of settles down and doesn't drown. That's because of this special liquid that is enriched with oxygen. And it turns out that mammals, like us, we can breathe this stuff. If we completely fill our lungs with this special liquid, it's possible to survive. You can actually breathe. It does have downside, however. It is really traumatic. There's a reason it's not widely used. It's used sometimes in medical conditions, but I think it's mostly as an emergency procedure. But yeah, and the mechanics reflect this. So there is an advantage to respiring in this way. You get advantage on panic rolls. However, there's a high chance you might gain a lot of stress for going down this route. This whole section about ingress is just basically like, make sure you're ready. Make sure your character sheet ready. The adventure's going to be starting very soon. And there's just time for a last bit of theme. More propaganda. This surf god, honour the corporation, but first maintain the light. That is inspired by a phrase I came across on this plaque at the seaside here in the UK. And it turns out there was this long-running tradition of people maintaining the sea walls there. So this is directly sort of adapted from a traditional phrase that they have around, but maintain the sea wall. And on the right there, you have the letter of last resort. This I'm not going to scroll down because this is now the start of all this stuff, the actual transcripts. But the instructions there do refer to this letter of last resort, 9L. And this is inspired by letter forms that used to be distributed. Now I can't remember off the top of my head if it was World War I or World War II, but certainly amongst the Allies. And as you might imagine, the military were pretty paranoid about any information from conscripts that might be sensitive getting into the wrong hands. So your loved one would receive not quite a heartfelt, ridiculously written letter. They'd just get this form where you've crossed off all the things you don't want to say and left them with a message that you do want to say. And they were really quite limited. This is probably an exaggerated form of one of those letter forms. But basically, yeah, your partner, offspring, parents or loved ones can be told in this this letter that you have served a greater purpose or whatever. And there's no mechanical, aspect to this part of the adventure. It's literally just setting the scene, giving the sense that actually you might be quite expendable, and that might be not a very good thing. But it's a little bit of fun. Right, I'm probably going to leave it there. I mean, the rest of it you'll have to, encounter if you do end up reading or picking up this adventure. If you don't already have this thing, you can find out more at alfredvalley.itch.io. You might also find there, if I'm organised, a link to the soundtrack to this adventure. In fact, during this commentary, you will be able to hear some of the tracks from that soundtrack in the background there. I commissioned an artist called Gus BC to make this amazing soundtrack that goes along with the adventure. I'm really happy with how it's turned out, and there's actually an extra module that provides a mini location that is connected with that soundtrack, so you can go find that, check it out, download it if you want. But yeah, I mean, that's all for me. But yeah, if you do end up checking this out in more detail, please consider leaving a rating or a comment on Itch. It's always nice to get those as a creator, except unless you were giving it 1 star or something. Please don't do that. Just keep it to yourself. Right, bye.